Hi, Robert Kiyosaki, and I'm best known for this book here, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And so I welcome all of you from out there in the real world. And I want to explain my outfit today. It's a little casual, but what this is a rugby jersey, and it says New Zealand on it because there was this fantastic tournament called the World Cup of Rugby. And so I am a rugby player. And I love football, what they call gridiron. I love football. I played football all the way through high school and college, but I wasn't passionate about it. So back when I was in flight school for the Navy or the Marine Corps in Florida, my friend introduced me to rugby. I said, what's rugby? And he says, I don't know. He says, all I know about rugby players is they play hard and they drink a lot of beer. I said, sounds good to me. So back in the, I believe it was the 60s, I went out for my first rugby game and I loved it. So I love football, but I'm passionate about rugby. That's my way of saying this to you. Passion is much better than love. And so since then, I started playing rugby. I traveled all over the world. And when they have the World Cup of Rugby on, which this year is going to be in London, I'm going to be there. I'm the old guy in the stands cheering. But that's what passion does. And as my friend Tony Robbins says, you got to live with passion. So a lot of people want to be rich, but they're not passionate about it. And part of being passionate about it is you got to find your game. Like in the game of money, there's many, many different games going on. You can play the stock market and go network marketing. You can do real estate. You can be an entrepreneur. You know, as Steve Jobs says, thank God there's many doors to heaven, financial heaven. But the key is passion. So I am passionate about rugby, and New Zealand has the best rugby team in the world, or one of the best. It's called the All Blacks. So I love the game of rugby. I am passionate about it. So if you can find that passion in your line of work, or say it another way, of the other side of it, how many of you are working at a job you're not passionate about? If you're not passionate, you probably won't be that successful. I don't care what you do. So another reason I love New Zealand, is the kiwi bird, and the little kiwi bird. And as all rugby players say, the kiwi bird is a little bird that eats roots, shoots, and leaves. And it's a fantastic little bird. So with that said, I'm going to go on to life. But as Tony Robbins says, may you live with passion. And so that I am in my passionate outfit today. I still cheer for football and all this, but this is my passion. So with that said, for those who are just joining me, I'll give you a little story of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. For those that hadn't known the story, Rich Dad, Poor Dad is a story of my two dads. My real dad was the head of education for the state of Hawaii, PhD. Great man, tall for Japanese, 6'4", and PhD. Graduated from university in 2 years. Valedictorian of his high school class. In fact, out of 6 kids in his family, 3 were the valedictorians. So they're all academic geniuses. Unfortunately, that's not me. And my rich dad was my best friend's father, and he was a man without any education because his father died early, and he had to take over the family business. So Rich Dad, Poor Dad is this very simple story of what 2 fathers tell their 2 sons, my best friend and I, about money. And what they say is opposite. And my whole point of Rich Dad, Poor Dad is this: all coins have 3 sides. In a coin, there's no such thing as a one-sided coin. So all coins have 3 sides: heads, tail, and the edge. And so Rich Dad, Poor Dad was very simply for you to read it, so you could understand it, and then stand on the edge and decide which side is best for you. Do I want to be poor and middle class? Then you do what my poor dad said. You want to be poor and middle class? Go to school, get a job, work hard, save money, buy a house, get out of debt, and live below your means, and invest for the long term in the stock market. That's what the poor and middle class do. If you want to be rich, you got to do something different. So Rich Dad, Poor Dad was simply written so to give you a choice to stand on the edge, which is best for you. For me personally, I'd rather be on the rich dad side. I didn't want to be on the poor dad side. So when you look at politics, there's Republicans and Democrats. When you look at the last election, it was Obama versus, what was his name? Mitt Romney. Poor man, rich man. Obama, I'm not Republican or Democrat, so I'm not taking a side here. Obama is a poor man who went to Harvard and all that stuff. Romney was a rich man that went to Harvard and all that stuff. But both are very different men, and you'll always have two sides. So you have poor and you have rich. So your choice is to decide which side is best for you, poor, middle class, or rich. And so that's what Rich Dad's about. So in keeping with Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and the idea of three sides to a coin, heads, tails, and the edge here, is that, the question is, what is an asset and what is a liability? So in Rich Dad, Poor Dad, this book had to be self-published in 1997 because most financial experts, I didn't know what I was talking about, because I said, your house is not an asset. So let me give you this. I'm not saying don't buy a house. I said your house is not an asset, especially for the poor and middle class. So, and whereas the poor and middle class will say, oh, my house is my asset. It's the best investment in the world and all this stuff. And that's not what people say. This came out in 1997 when all the prices were going up and people were flipping houses and borrowing money out of their equity to pay off their credit card debt. So for me to say in 1997 your house is not an asset, the financial experts of the world said, you're a dummy. You know what you're talking about. And I wasn't saying don't buy a house. I said just don't call it an asset. Because you read this book here, very simply, assets put money in your pocket, whether you work or not. And liabilities take money from your pocket. So for most people, they go to their bank and they list as an asset, I got my house and I got my car. I'm rich. Well, no, you're poor because a house, even if you have no debt on it, is taking taxes out of your pocket, is taking repairs, maintenance, upkeep, and all that stuff. And same as a car. You may not have any debt on it, but it costs you insurance and all that. But worst of all, there's no income coming in. There's no money coming in. So the poor and middle class are poor simply because the only way they have income is they work for money. They get a job. That's why the school teacher says, go to school, get a job. Well, the trouble with having a job, you pay taxes, and they have no assets. So you think about that. What causes a person to be poor or middle class is they think having a job is smart, and it is. And they think working hard is smart, so they pay more taxes. And they think their house is an asset and their car is an asset. And that's why they stay poor. So the very basic difference of Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and all this stuff, and the lesson for you here is if you want to change your life, you have to change your definition of your words. I'll say it again. Assets put money in your pocket. Liabilities take money from your pocket. It's as simple as that. So for myself personally, my wife and I have 4 houses, and they're all liabilities. I really don't like them that much. They're beautiful houses. They're in beautiful resorts and all that stuff. But we didn't buy these 4 houses until we had assets. And the assets we bought are called apartment houses. So today my wife and I have 4,500 apartments. And those apartments cash flow and pay for our liabilities, which are our houses. So if you understand that, it's pretty simple. The problem is most people never go past buying a house or buying a car. There's this thing in New York City, condos are now going for $20 million, $40 million, and one went for $100 million. Well, I really don't want to afford a $20 million condo. Why? Because there's no cash flow from it. I have to put money into it. But I can afford a $20 million apartment house because that apartment house puts money in my pocket. And best of all, the bankers will give me the money to buy either one. I can buy the $20 million apartment house, or I can buy the $20 million condo in New York. The difference is the $20 million apartment house, my tenants pay the mortgage for me, and I put money in my pocket, and I pay less taxes because I'm doing what the government wants me to do, which is to provide housing. See, all tax breaks are government incentives. So the government gives you incentives, to have a mortgage, gives you an incentive to provide housing, apartment houses, gives you incentives to invest in oil and gas, gives you incentives to pay for food, gives you incentives to be an entrepreneur. So really, taxes are very good for those with financial education. So that's some of the differences. I don't really want to afford, although I could pay for a $20 million condo in New York, I'd rather have a $20 million condo with 600 units in Texas because I make more money on it. So very simply, that's it. Another big lesson in here in Rich Dad, Poor Dad was cash flow versus capital gains. And most people say, oh, I'm rich because the value of my house went up. So let's say they bought a house at $100,000 and now it's worth $200,000. Oh, I'm $100,000 capital gains. And they say, oh, my net worth went up. Well, who gives a crap? You know what I mean? So that was in 1997 when I wrote this book. I put it out there. I said, your house is not an asset. Net worth is worth less. And people went nuts. Also said savers are losers, all that stuff. Then in 2007, 10 years later, as you know, the subprime market crashed and millions found out their hard way their house was the biggest liability they had. It wasn't an asset. Also, when the government started printing money called quantitative easing, they found out that savers are losers. Because when you print money, what happens is taxes and inflation go up. But also when you print money, the rich get richer and the poor and middle class get poorer. So very simply, Rich Dad, Poor Dad was really a book on words. Income, expenses, assets, liabilities, capital gains versus cash flow. And 90% of the middle class and the poor, they invest for capital gains. They want the price of something to go up, which is nuts. It's crazy. And what the rich want is they want income or cash flow that's tax-free. Those are some of the differences covered here in Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And the reason we have Rich Dad Education and Rich Dad Coaching especially, your coach can help guide you through the thought process. You see, once you start to change your thoughts, you can change your world. But if you don't change your thoughts, the world looks the same. You'll still go out there and say, oh, my house is an asset. Or my new Toyota is an asset. When it's really a liability, or you'll say such words as, my net worth goes up. Those are very middle class words. They're not the words of the rich. So really, I didn't do too well in Sunday school either. But in Sunday school, I learned that the word becomes flesh. So if you use poor words or misdefined words, you have poor thoughts and poor results in your hands. You see, how much money you have in your hands depends upon what's going on between your ears. So really, that's all Rich Dad, Poor Dad was about, was to kind of have you think about the words you use, the thoughts you have, and all this. And it's especially true for people who say, oh, I'm not interested in money. Those are your words. People who say, I'm not interested in money, well, money's not interested in you. Or if you say the rich are evil, then that's all you'll see are evil people. And trust me, there's a lot of evil and greedy people who are rich, but there's also a lot of evil and greedy people who are poor and middle class too. So until you change the words you use, nothing will change. Another thing is this, they say, well, I'll never be rich. That means you'll always be poor. You see, so that's why the word becomes flesh from Sunday school is a very important lesson to learn. So this book here is really about how do you redefine the words you use. Because if you're still calling your house an asset and it's going to go up in price, it's very middle class, you guys, very poor. So if you change that, you can change your life. That's where it starts. The final thing I want to say is this on this book here, and I'll go into the next book, is when people say to me, I want to be a millionaire, like I'm watching that the Millionaires Club, or, there's a dating service for millionaires. My question is, are they net worth millionaires? Are they cash flow millionaires? Or are they income millionaires? Let me give you an example. Back in the old days, in the 80s, there were a lot of middle-class people who were net worth millionaires. Like they bought a house for $100,000 and the house went up in price and it went to $1 million. So they didn't owe anything on the house, but the net worth, but the capital gains in the house was $1 million. So here's this middle-class guy saying, I'm a millionaire. I am a net worth millionaire. Or they have their 401k, and in the 401k, the value of their portfolio went up to $1 million. So they can say, I'm a millionaire. That is a net worth millionaire. Another kind of millionaire is, let's say I play professional baseball, professional football, professional rugby. Oh, I'm making $5 million a year. Well, then you too are an income millionaire. That's another type of millionaire. But the third type of millionaire that I wanted to be is I wanted to be a cash flow millionaire. And what that is income coming from my assets, my apartment houses, my oil wells, from my businesses and all that. That money comes flowing in. So cash flow millionaire is a rich millionaire because your income is coming from assets, not from labor or not from speculation in the real estate market or the stock market. So those are the three different types of millionaires. And a choice that you have when you're signing up for our programs is what kind of millionaire you want to be. So let me give you a couple more differences between a net worth millionaire. Net worth millionaire, your money is still taxed. And if you're an income millionaire, like a professional baseball player or a CEO or a doctor or a lawyer, you pay very high tax. But the great thing about being a cash flow millionaire from my assets is that I never have to work. The money keeps coming in, and I can pay zero taxes. So that's why I'm saying again, on one side of the coin, the poor and middle class, I'm including high income people like professional athletes. Debt and taxes make them poor. On the side of the rich, the truly rich, people who have assets, debt and taxes make them richer. So one of the things when you're reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad, or any one of our books or going through our coaching and education programs, is your choice to decide which kind of millionaire you want to be. I really don't want to be a net worth millionaire because it's not really real and it's taxable. I'm really not that smart to be a high income. I'll never be a good doctor, lawyer, or professional athlete. Besides, I'm paying the highest taxes. So again, there's three different types of millionaires. I could be, net worth millionaire. My portfolio is big. My house went up in value. I could be a high income type of guy. I could be a professional athlete, doctor, lawyer, CEO. But those guys pay the highest taxes. Or I can be an asset millionaire where the cash flow comes in $1 million without working and I pay no tax on it. So when you're going through our programs or reading our books, those are kind of the choices you're making. I'm not saying one is right or wrong. I chose cash flow millionaire because it was more challenging and I really like making a lot of money without working and paying nothing in taxes. That's my game. So those are your choices. So let me summarize Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I'll just tell you a quick story. I have a friend, and he's all proud of his son. His son's an engineer. He has a high-paying job, married with 3 kids. He's really happy. And his son's working really hard so he can get higher pay. Well, the trouble with higher pay, moving to a higher tax bracket. And because he has kids, he's going to buy a house because it's an asset when it's really a liability. He's going to buy a bigger house. He's going to get deeper in debt. And then he's going to call his house an asset when it's a liability. Because if he loses his job, he loses his house. And then he's going to try and save money. Why would you save money when the government is printing money? When you print money, the retirees, the poor, the middle class, the savers, all get thrown under the bus. Oh, no, he's got to save money. But he's going to live below his means. Well, why would you live below your means when they're printing money and everything's going down anyway? Why don't you expand your means? Why don't you expand your education? Why don't you really buy assets versus thinking your liability, like your house and your car, are assets? Expand your means into the asset column. And the third thing is to invest for the long term in the stock market through their 401k or IRA. But why would you do that when the stock market is at historic all-time highs? You think it's going to go up forever? Oh, no. I'm going to invest for the long term in a well-diversified portfolio in the stock market at all-time highs. And that's what Rich Dad, Poor Dad did. In 1997, it came out, and it said all those things. Savers were losers, house not an asset, rich don't work for money, they work for assets, and said like this. And then what happened in 2007, 10 years later, everything came through. The markets came crashing down. So today, markets are all-time high. People are rushing out to buy houses. They're going back to school to get a higher-paying job. And they're going to jump into the stock market because it's an all-time high. Ladies and gentlemen, that's why the rich get richer and the poor and middle class get poor. And that's what's discussed in this book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. So I want to talk about my latest book. It's come out in January 2015. This, to me, is my most important work to date. And a second chance for your money, for your life, and our world. And how many, this book is for two types of people. I mean, how many of you have said, oh, if I could do it all over again, what would I do? And the second person I wrote this book for is for the person who's a little paranoid today. Said, well, Obama says, or the Republicans say, the economy is doing better, but in your gut, something's rotten in Denmark. So those are the two people. The first person is a person who says, I wish I had a second chance at life. And the other person is somebody who suspects something is wrong. So Second Chance was written, and this is why it's important. It's in three parts: past, present, and future. This book is about how you see the future, your future, rather than what somebody tells you to do here. And the way you see the future is by looking at the past. So the beauty of Second Chance, there's graphs and charts, which means you get the story via pictures. That means a 10-year-old kid can read this and get the picture. It's very few words. The other thing about it, it's in Socratic. Socratic means question and answer. Most A students like lecture, just be told what to do. This thing here, people are asking questions and getting answers and all this. So it's very simple. It's very good for people who want to explain to their kids. For example, this chart here shows the income of the middle class. It's going down, not going up. And this chart here sees the rise of poverty in America. So you don't have to be a macroeconomic PhD. You can look at this, oh, poor, getting poorer, middle class is shrinking. And then you have some explanation of it. This chart here explains why America's in serious trouble. It's because of the baby boom generation. The baby boom generation was 1946 to 1964, but the baby boom generation is going to be the biggest baby bust generation in history. And this chart shows why, because this is what's happening to Social Security. And what this thing is. So your kid, 10 years old, oh, does that mean I'm going to take care of you, mommy and daddy, because you don't have enough money? Because that the kid will get it. Oh, that's what's happening. And worst of all, what this book spells out in the fine, it's $100 trillion liability for America. $100 trillion. There's no way we can pay that off. It's $225 trillion in tomorrow's dollars. It's $100 trillion in today's dollars, if you know what that means. It means we're broke. So Second Chance, again, part one, it explains how we got into this mess. And then part two is what you can do about it today, the present. And part three is the future. And the future lies in education. So I'll show you a few parts of it here. Most people, the poor and middle class, say get out of debt. This book explains the difference between good debt and bad debt in more detail. For example, in 2007, when the market started coming down, I was ecstatic. I hate to say that a lot of people lost their homes and all this, but I'm not the guy that did it. They bought the idea that houses are assets, and it came down. So some of the best real estate in the world came crashing down due to the subprime mortgage problem. My friend, my wife, my friend Kenny McElroy, and my wife Kim and I, and our companies, we purchased almost $500 million worth of real estate using debt. And for most people in the poor and middle class, on this side of the coin, the poor and middle class side of the coin, debt is terrible. But the reason you have financial education is because when you understand how debt can make you rich, using approximately $500 million, $500 million, we started buying all this property using other people's money or the bank's money. And we're buying it at 5% interest. Today, that was refinanced down to 2.5% interest. So debt at 5% and debt at 2.5% interest made us richer because we bought assets, not liabilities. So other people were losing their houses, we were buying apartment houses. So that's an example of how debt can make you richer. The other thing about part two of this book, everything is opposite on the other side of the coin. Like it says, oh, investing is risky. This book goes to the other side of the coin. In chapter 17, it explains why investing is not risky and what really is risky. And what really is risky is when you invest for capital gains. Capital gains, once again, you hope the price of the real estate will go up, try to hope your stock will go up. That's risky. That's gambling. I don't do that. So in chapter 17, you'll be able to read and go, okay, what is risky? So you get to redefine the definition of risky in your head. And I think the most important chapter of all, if I can find it, is chapter 18. And it's the opposite of save money. So for all of you out there who believe in saving in your 401k and getting out of debt and saving money in your bank account, this is your chapter. I'll say it again. Why in the world would you save money when the government is printing money? You've got to be crazy. And I'll say this again. When the government prints money, it throws the poor and middle class under the bus. And the next crash is going to throw under the bus. The next people to lose will be the rich who have their wealth stored in the stock market. So for the, it's like you might be making $2 million a year, and you might have $8 million in the stock market. You're the perfect target right there. You're making $2 million as income, and you got $8 million in the stock market. You might be the biggest losers next. So anyway, chapter 18 is the opposite of save money. And in this book here, the most important thing is you'll see the opposite of it. And this here is called the velocity of money. And this is something very few people know and understand. The velocity of money explains why I don't park my money. I don't put it in the bank and leave it for the long term. I don't go in the stock market and leave it for the long term. Velocity of money, my money is always moving to acquire more and more assets and pay less and less taxes using debt. So this is probably one of the most sophisticated diagrams I've ever used in my books and things like this. So for those of you who are pretty familiar with Rich Dad, Poor Dad and other books, this thing is worth studying. There's 10 things I do to keep my money moving. So once again, the whole thing with Rich Dad, Poor Dad is the rich do something different that the poor and middle class do not do. And right here, you'll have a diagram of what I do. I'm not saying that you should do it, and I'm not saying it's the right thing to do. But when you read these 10 things I'm doing to keep my money moving, the velocity of money versus saving money, I think the lights will go on your head. Then you can stand on the edge of the coin. You'll see what the poor and middle class are doing. You see what the rich are doing. And when you stand on the edge, the intelligence side, you can say, well, this is what I should do. So ladies and gentlemen, all I'm saying here is this in second chance. For those of you who want a second chance for your money, your life, and our world, this is your book. It's very simply written. You can use it to teach your children because there's pictures all over the place. You can educate your child as to why, when you go to school, get a job, work hard, save money, invest for the long term in the stock market and get out of debt is really bad advice today. At least you have a chance to re-educate your child, have them think differently. So second chance is very simply written. It's about the past, the present, and the future, and things like this. So this is what this book is about. I think it's the right book at the right time, because my predictions are, it's been my predictions for a year, that 2016 will be one of the most volatile times in world economic history. The reason it's going to be world economic history is because never before in the history of the world have so many of the richest countries in the world, the US, Japan, Britain, Germany, are they printing money? Everybody is printing money. So why would you be saving money? It doesn't make sense. So this book hopefully will make some sense so you have a second chance. And this is the good news. You see, we all know markets go up, markets come down, and markets go sideways. If, let's say, the stock market is all-time high, when it comes down, it's the poor and middle class get wiped out again. But if you're rich, when markets come, if you have financial education and intelligence, when markets come down, you get richer. So you actually make more money when markets crash. So your second chance may be by doing things opposite of what the poor and middle class are doing. Now that takes financial education. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying everybody can do it. But at least when you reach second chance, you'll have a second chance to really look at the world economy. So my final words are this. Some people ask me, is the stock market going to go up? Is it going to go sideways? Or is it going to come down? My answer is I don't care. Because with financial education, I'll make money when it goes up. I'll make money when it goes sideways, and I'll make money when it comes down. And that's what I want for you. I want you to say, I don't care. It doesn't make any difference because I'll get rich when it goes up, comes down, or goes sideways. So as you can tell, there's a lot to learn. So let me give you a couple of more thoughts on the word debt. You see what happens if I borrow money, let's say for an apartment house, and the government keeps printing money and lowering interest rates, I am paying off that millions of dollars in debt, or it could be $10,000 worth of debt, doesn't make any difference. I am paying back the debt with cheaper money. So why in the world would you not get into debt? Unfortunately, what most people get into, the poor and middle class, is consumer debt. So they buy new purses, handbags, cars, which is consumer debt. So debt isn't good or bad. If you buy investor debt, and if what I say is going to come true, the debt I have is going to make me richer. I'll pay less in taxes, and I'll pay it back with cheaper dollars. But I'm not paying it back. My tenants pay it back. And that's the difference between good debt and bad debt. There's a lot to learn, but this is not a time to just routinely say, oh, get out of debt and save money. That's very, very naive thinking, especially in today's economy.